Thank you so much for tuning into another fun episode of We Can Fight Like Cats If We Have to. I really shouldn't say fun episode. I always say fun episode. Um, a lot of people get offended by my commentary. So maybe it's not fun. Maybe it's welcome to another incredibly offensive to white people episode of We Can Fight Like Cats If We Have to. My name is Saly Davis, and I'm unapologetically offensive. You have Natasha. She's a little bit more diplomatic than I am.
Sometimes. Yep.
Sometimes. And you have Allon, who nobody really wants to mess with. Not on a bad day, not on a good day. Man's a straight shooter.
I try.
So we've had the comment before, like about language and stuff. And I since we've had the conversations, and we've kind of discussed it amongst ourselves, right? Because it's on the topic of fun. Why not bring this up, right? A lot of people will say, you need to tone down your language. And it's usually either a white person that says that to us or a conservative of some point of traditional practice person who says that. And quite frankly, I think that the language is part of the freedom that we're told to shut up constantly, So for me, when I use these words to express the disdain, the distaste, the anger, the frustration, the disgust, my goal is not to offend, but if it happens to offend, I'm not apologetic about it because I am thoroughly disgusted with our system. I'm thoroughly disgusted with what our system has become. And I'm not going to be part of this complacent lie that we are feeding to this population and to the children of this population that, everything is okay.
Yeah.
Nobody is here trying to grab power. It's not a power grab, but we're going to censor you by saying that you're not civilized enough in your language. You're not classy enough in your language. You're not educated enough in your language. You're not academic enough in your language. To those people, I mean, I get you, but you don't get me. And that is a problem. That is a problem that you are listening to our podcast and you're choosing to be more offended than actually come from a place where you are offended that our system abuses children to this extent in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have a really big problem, where we see the hypocrisy in this whole culture of ours. Whether we be Canadians, whether we be immigrants, whether we be, colorful Canadians, white Canadians, French Canadians, English Canadians, Indigenous Canadians, it really, at the end of the day, words are just words. And if the words that we are choosing to use are more offensive than the content of what we are saying to you, are more offensive than the oppression that you are choosing to turn a blind eye on, then again, you're contributing to the problem. And with this, like, here we are playing the game of politics again, it's elections 2021 in Canada. A really popular comment that we made in the last episode was the elections of the dum-dums. You don't know who's going to win, but the pickings are slim. I feel fundamentally that as a woman, I'm not represented. As a person of color, I'm not represented. As an overeducated, underemployed, I'm not represented. As a survivor of domestic, situation, I'm not represented. As, a person who experienced child abuse, I'm not represented. A person who is racialized and it's still legal, I'm not represented. A lot of people listened to the debates and got really excited. And we had two debates. One where, Justin Trudeau cried his soul and said how much he is Quebecois. And frankly, I don't give a shit, when that was a response to, I believe, the Bloc's comment that he doesn't understand our nation. First off, Quebec is not a nation. It is a part of the country called Canada. And even the separation plan of leaving the nation but using our economy was
Yeah.
not a separation of the nation. So let's stop this joke and insanity for a moment and be honest about what is actually happening with the Bloc Québécois claiming that it's a nation. Justin, the fact that you can kiss up to your provincial identity, I really don't care. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard the bits of this one. It was a French one, but I don't know, like Natasha, your eyes are bulging out of your face. Allon, you seem to be like just tuning out because it's just so disgusting.
No, not tuning out, but I mean,
it's disgusting, right?
It
so
is.
foolish.
It's disappointing. Like, I'm disappointed in Trudeau at this point. Like, I try to champion the guy. I try to tell people, you know what, fuck, Trudeau's a little harsh. But the more and further along this man goes, the deeper he digs the hole. I can't keep co-signing someone who keeps digging a hole like this. I just can't. So I'm hanging my head in shame because I've stood up and said, don't be so hard on this guy. And yet, and still he keeps doing this type of thing. And you know, it's a typical, for me, a typical politician move. You start off and you act like you're different, and you act like you care, and you act like you're empathetic, and then that politician shit kicks in. And now he needs that white vote. And you know, and so now he's gonna go ahead and play that fucking huge white card. It's just, I can't keep defending a guy who's gonna keep being wishy-washy and not clearly make a stance for, you know, racialized and people of color and for indigenous people. He clearly does not really care. He doesn't care
anything other than rich people.
Right. And
he's
the
not
fact
taking
that
a stand for anything but rich men.
Right. And the fact that he hasn't stuck to his early stances in his political career and stuck true to them. Like, the man doesn't need money. He doesn't need clout. He doesn't need any of it. Like, this is the perfect storm for a politician to actually come out and stand firm on issues that are not popular in the mainstream. And he's not. And I really don't understand why he's not.
Because they're not popular with him. It's that
apparently
simple.
not. Apparently, you're right. You're right. You're right. Because if he did really care and it really was, you know, torturing his heart and soul that these atrocities were happening, you're right. It wouldn't be an issue. You're absolutely right. You're right. So clearly, whatever he said or did was only political, for political gain and political motive. And so you're correct on that. You're absolutely right on that.
I was watching him like pretty carefully, and first I felt a bit sorry for him because everybody was attacking him and saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, which in fact he did not do a lot of things that he said he was going to do. So they were correct, but I just kind of felt bad for the guy. But at the same time, I noticed one thing came through really strongly, which was he kept going back to the mandatory vaccination issue. He kept going back to, well, we can't do anything until this pandemic is over. And we can't get, you know, the pandemic can't be over until everybody has mandatory vaccinations. He just kept going back to that, circling back to that. Whenever they would sort of call him out on anything, it would be, I've done this.
Oh,
I've done
white
that.
people problems.
Yes, exactly. White people problems. And he just kept using the pandemic and the mandatory vaccination as his thing. Everything was, it can't be done until the pandemic is over. I can't do this until it's over, and we have to do this. So he just kept going back to that like a broken record, and I was beginning to find it pretty irritating. But I think you're right. Obviously, he needs that white vote, and it's not going to make him popular to go on about how badly racialized and minority communities and Indigenous people still have it. So if he's going on about that, he's going to lose a lot of that vote to the Conservatives or the Greens even. So
or even the PPC. Hey, dude, PPC is becoming a threat, in my opinion. I think they're going to get a lot more votes. They weren't even invited, right?
They didn't even invite them to the debate, and
which is unreasonable, in my opinion.
That can backfire, because when you do that, that raises your sympathy vote. And a lot of people are going to say, okay, he's not part of the system. That's why he was kicked out, which is possibly true.
No.
But that can work against, the whole point of banning him in the first place, because now he's seen as a rebel and, somebody who's fighting the system. And he actually isn't. Like, he's a core capitalist. And, when has he, said anything to change things? He's all about going backwards in time. But one thing I did want to say was, did you notice the really hilarious sentiments brought up by the Bloc Québécois person when he was asked about systemic discrimination and why Quebec keeps passing racist laws? And he was just, oh my God.
Crying. Yes.
I was just, what? I mean, he's unreal. Like, I was just looking
They're
at him
all
and
unreal.
yeah, but he's out of touch with reality. Like, he knows.
They're all out of touch with reality. You know what? Jagmeet Singh was no better, saying that our labor shortage will be resolved by bringing more immigrants. Does he know what the immigration system is in some of our provinces? That is complete obliviousness to
But
the
that's what they
human
do,
trafficking
right?
happening
Yeah,
in
but
the East Coast.
That is what they do. They bring
And
in
that's a great way to
immigration
enrage
deal with
white people.
Yeah, but those are white people who are not even interested in those jobs. That's what we keep going back to. Like, when what's his name, Higgs put out that call last year for the seafood industry and other industries for people to work, nobody answered those calls. So they had no choice but to get migrant workers.
Workers.
So it's not like they're getting immigrants for jobs that people want, because they're not. Nobody's taking those jobs. So if you're going to have a functioning country, you need to be realistic and realize that when you are giving people, certain things, like healthcare, or they can't really starve unless you are really, really like in a bad position, because of addictions or other things like that. It's difficult to starve. So there is a certain level of complacency that sets in when you have these things, and people can afford literally not to work in professions that they find repugnant. So that is where they're bringing in migrant workers, and they're going to keep doing that. And instead of people being grateful, which they should be, that they're taking jobs that they don't want to take, instead of that, they get hatred and abuse. And there was this cab driver who was just murdered in Nova Scotia like 2 days ago. Did you read that?
I heard about that very briefly.
Yeah, it was a Sikh person, international student, who was working as a cab driver, and he was just apparently just murdered in his home. And they are treating it like a hate crime, which is surprising, because apparently in New Brunswick we had no hate crimes last year. So it's
That's
always
Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia has hate crimes all the time.
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but when I think of that
It's
zero hate crime
hilarious.
thing, it's just
all of
I
it
don't
is
know
a
what to say.
facade. All of it is people pretending like they give a damn about other people. My biggest thing right now, I don't give a shit if you're pro-choice or pro-life. If it's even a discussion or a topic in your mind that one of these has to be defended, then you're not even pro-women's health. Because the simple fact that we keep coming back to this stupid damn question keeps us from progressing and bringing actual medical attention that women in this country need, specifically in the East Coast, where it's like completely decrepit. But in this entire country, women need medical attention for reproductive systems, for our vagina, for the men listening who cannot handle listening to the word vagina or uterus or, whatever the hell your problem is, or cervix. Or these are organs that can kill women if not taken care of. And here we are trying to still discuss and debate pro-life or pro-choice. Motherfucker, shut it up. Just shut up. Just shut up, man. Just shut up. We have women dying because they are bleeding too much and need transfusions in their cycles. Like, shut up.
But they're not.
I don't want to hear this.
They didn't even discuss that, the last debate that I saw.
It's not in the
Um,
debates, but it's in the debates. It's not in the
Right.
publicized debates. It's not questions anybody wants
But
to
that's
ask,
why,
but it's
that's
something
why,
we feel the need that we still have to discuss. And if we feel that there's a need to still discuss it, even on social media, you're seeing it left, right, and center. All these arguments about pro-choice and pro-life. Frankly, I don't give a damn shit. I almost died of an ectopic pregnancy. That's not about pro-life or pro-choice. That's about incompetence, medical incompetence. At what point are we going to go past this and actually pay attention to the problem, which is medical incompetence, period? It's not just medical access, it's medical incompetence. Like, it's a good combination of both. I don't
but I don't think
understand,
they
why do
want,
people have to get into each other's business
I don't
when
think they
it's
want
none
to
of their
have this
business, but they'll let people
conversation.
die in a hospital? Another woman died in the hospitals, in the emergency room this week as well. People are dying left, right, and center in this country, and all we can talk about is like, oh, I get so mad. Cultural identity, whether or not racism exists. Like, no, we know this shit exists. We don't give a shit what your cultural identity is. We definitely don't give a damn who your father is. Please. I honestly feel like this is Mubarak 2.0. Like, in Egypt, when Mubarak was dictating the country in our faux democracy, which is still, a faux democracy today, he was preparing and grooming his son to be the leader after him. How is this any different? The man gets perks for being Trudeau's son.
I think that the reason, when you hear topics being discussed that really don't really merit that much discussion, because it should be done and over with by now, the abortion debate should be finished. There's no, we shouldn't even be discussing it at this point, because it's been done, it's been discussed. I feel like these are deflections. I honestly think that when you talk about something, that is not really the main issue, you are essentially trying to get attention away from what is the real issue. And the fact is, why did this person call this election? I think that's a very, very serious thing, which was hardly discussed.
Well, why is he calling this election? Let's theorize here for a moment. Why is he calling an election?
Why? That's the point. And
what do you think?
Well, it's greed. It's desperation for power. And what nobody is seeing, because I keep seeing kind of like really basic posts saying, don't vote conservative just because you think the liberals are corrupt. Well, if I think they're corrupt and I think they've wasted money to an obscene degree, why would I vote for them? And okay, don't vote conservative because they're seen as the only legitimate threat. But the fact is, you have this party, okay, and they had emergency powers for the last 18 months. And that made them almost like a dictatorship. They were calling the shots. They didn't have to listen to anybody because the NDP was so desperate not to have an election. They were agreeing to literally everything they were saying. So it was almost a dictatorship because they did have to get the NDP to sign on. But if they don't need that, and they have emergency powers on top of that, do you know how incredibly dangerous that is to have a party in power that doesn't need any other party to co-sign it and they have emergency powers? That is literally like we would be living in the Soviet Union and China combined. That is what it would be like. But nobody is talking about it because it's I don't know, they just can't comprehend it, maybe because they've never seen an actual dictatorship, but I have. And I think your parents have, even if you haven't.
I lived in Egypt.
You did? Okay.
Yeah,
so
as an adult, like, it was insane. Okay. It was insane.
It's insane. You have no powers whatsoever. You have no way to protect yourself, and your only protection is your family. So that's what we're going to descend into if this idiot and his power hungry party are going to get, the majority that they obviously went to, call this election for. Nobody's talking about this. They're not talking about what a desperate situation we're in. I don't care how nice he is as a person. If you ask me, yes, I would say if he was not a member of this party, I'm sure he'd be a nice guy. But that's not the point. That's not how we're dealing. We're not dealing with Trudeau the man. We're dealing with Trudeau the head of the Liberal Party, and that's a very, dangerous position to be in if they are going to get a majority and they have emergency powers on top of that.
Any of
They
them,
can
really.
literally do anything. No questions asked. We have seen those dictatorships. We know what they're like. These people are like out to lunch. Like I see, your average white Canadian, and they have no clue what they could be dealing with. And they're sitting there talking about, things that are not life or death issues. Yes, abortion is, I think it's already been agreed to. I don't even know why we're talking about it. Nobody's seriously going to
Because
reverse
some people can't mind their
that.
business.
No, but nobody's going to reverse that. Every woman in the country is going to take to their, take to the streets. It's not going to happen. As far as the
That's what the US said.
it's not going to happen. You can't. Okay, there's a point where you cross a line, and people are too used to things they've always had, and I don't think they can go back. I think it's really, they would risk.
Well,
They
we've
would
spent
risk
a year of going back.
No, but they would risk pissing off white women. I don't think they're going to do that.
A lot
They're
of white
not going to
women
do it.
actually are
Not-
pro-life.
Not that many. If you look in a room and you go into a room which is not some, Baptist rural kind of town, you're not going to have more than 1 or 2 out of 10. They're very much the minority. So I don't think that any mainstream political party, whether it's Liberals, Conservatives, or NDP, is going to risk alienating such a huge chunk of white women. I just don't think they are.
What do you think, Allon?
They
Your
can't
eyes are
afford
glazed.
to. They literally can't afford to. The demographics don't allow it. Now, I do think that the Conservatives might try to, placate their Bible base by maybe making a couple of changes, but reverse it, I think it would be political suicide. They wouldn't dare. So getting back to what I think is the real issue in this election is, why are we having an election? And the fact is, this CERB, and I know you guys agree with the CERB, and I'm like the outlier here. I agree with programs. I agree with supporting people. But I think the reasoning behind the CERB is what disturbed me. It was not that they suddenly had a, come to God moment and said, you know what, we should take care of every Canadian. No, it was very politically motivated. It was done with a very specific purpose in mind. And that was to get a huge number of people on their side so they could win this election. And I think we're at a very critical point, and I don't think the average person realizes just how critical it is. So that is my point of view on this election. And I have to say, even though I'm not a fan of the Green Party, because I think that they have, they're not, I don't know who they are and what they're there for, but I know they say climate change, but I think there's more forces that work there. However, I do have to say props to Anime Paul for calling out that Bloc Quebecois person who said that systemic discrimination he shouldn't have acknowledged that it existed because it created a toxic atmosphere or something. And then she said, I'm going to educate you on that. And then it was a great exchange. I really enjoyed it. So that was one positive thing about the election debate, which I actually enjoyed, but I didn't really get much information out of it. And I don't think a lot of people did, because there was just too much back and forth, too much shouting, too much sort of, you didn't do this, well, you can't do this. And it was very childish.
Almost like the first Trump-Biden debate.
Yeah, very childish. I don't think people got too much information out of it. I think it was very, very acrimonious. And again, what can you really communicate in 35 days? That was never the point. You called an election at the last minute. It's not, everyone was thinking, is he going to, is he not going to? And then he did. And, God knows what's going to happen. I really, really hope that they don't get a majority, because if they do, I don't think this country is going to be recognizable within a few months. I don't think anyone is going to recognize it, and it's going to be like a complete dictatorship. And I've lived in those before. No desire to live in them again.
Allon, you seem to have drifted. What's going on?
Oh no, I'm just listening to what's being said. I think it's interesting how, you know, politics here in Canada is really no different than the States. I think everyone likes to, you know, say that it's different because it's
No.
Canada, but it's really
No.
no different. And I think the
No.
fact that Jagmeet Singh is now spewing more political style rhetoric
Yep.
is case in point. I think, you know, people really need to understand. I've said this before, but I really wish people would just get the point that politicians are politicians because they have a certain skill set. And being a politician is a career choice and it's a career path. And unfortunately, you know, the old boy network or you know, the whatever we want to call it is very much in place. And if you want to be a politician and have longevity and sustain yourself in this game, which is what it is, the game, you have to play the game. And I think that, you know, a lot of politicians start off, you know, on one path and they see how the game is played. And then they realize that and they start shifting their policies or shifting their rhetoric. And that comment that he made about, you know, the immigrants and the influx of more immigrants to solve the labor shortage is a clear example of this man doing a 180, right? For political longevity and sustaining reasons, right? So, you know, unfortunately, I think that, you know, us minorities just really need to understand that politics is a game. And I don't think we're really going to have anyone in politics that is going to be fully on our side because of the fact that it's a game. And the fact that there are just rules and policies and structures in place that, you know, unless you're going to burn to the ground and start anew, you're not going to shake them, right? And I think which is one of two things: either we realize that about politicians and people of color who become politicians, or we subscribe to the mindset that at least they're there, and every small half step, quarter step is progress, and eventually, in the great by and by, we will get to where we want to be. I don't think we can, you know, subscribe to the idea that one politician is going to come along or one candidate is going to come along that is of color and change everything in one fell swoop. I think Obama proved that clearly, that no matter how good your intentions are, that the system in place is so corrupt and run so deep that your term is not going to be long enough for you to fix anything. You're barely going to get started by the time you're done. And I think that that's just something that, you know, that minorities kind of, unfortunately, I believe need to really kind of embrace and pick a side, either have lower standards for candidates or realize that they're going to flip eventually. Because if they want to have a career, they're going to have to start riding the line and towing the line of being a politician. As far as abortion goes, I never thought I would see the nonsense I'm seeing in the States right now. But that's what happens when you have a conservative Supreme Court. And, you know, this is what the conservatives want. And I mean, I was just telling my wife the other day, I'm surprised that feminists or white women, since feminism has a white face to it, are not in the streets burning and looting shit. Like, I don't understand why there isn't an uprising in the States anyway over what's going on in each individual state, of them literally just saying, fuck women, we're going to do what we want to do. And that, I don't understand why everyone's so quiet about this. I thought for sure, I mean, because honestly, for decades, women have said if they ever touched Roe v. Wade, there would be, you know, blood in the streets. And they're doing everything, but they're ruining it. They're destroying it. They want to eradicate it and reverse it. And I'm hearing peeps from celebrities. I'm hearing nothing from nobody. Like, I don't understand why this is flying under the radar like it is. And no one's really protesting or getting out there and saying anything. Is it COVID? Is that the reason why everyone's choosing to keep their mouths shut? I don't understand. And as far as them not doing it here in Canada, I can't say that they wouldn't.
Yeah, I can't say that they wouldn't.
I can't say that they wouldn't, because here your political system is not even like you've got people in power now that can stay in power forever. The way your politics works here is still very monarchical, in that someone can call a random election when they think they're going to win and continue to seize power over and over and over again, but give you the idea that it's a democracy and you actually have choice. That's a dangerous thing. At least in the States, you've got terms, right? So we knew Trump, if we succeeded 4 years, even if we didn't, we knew after a second term, his ass was gone, right? But here in Canada, it's very dangerous because you have monarchical structures that still exist, but we make everyone think that it's a democracy. So we can call a random election when we think we're going to win and stay in power forever. So if you have people, in power who are spewing this nonsense and you can't get rid of them, and they can keep calling elections when it favors them, it's a dangerous thing here in Canada. Canada is reactionary. If the United States succeeds in the majority of the states actually overturning locally Roe v. Wade decisions, Canada is going to start turning that tide. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because Canada's not going to deal with the influx of women coming to Canada to seek legal abortion. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Canada's image is not going to be able to sustain that, and they won't even consider it. They won't even take immigrants from the Middle East right now because of optics. They're damn sure not going to take Americans looking for. They didn't want Americans come over here for cheap drugs. You're talking about there's no way. There's no way. Canada will easily turn that tide if the United States continues to go down the path that it's going now. And it's a very, very slippery slope. And I don't think people understand that, if this gets overturned, it's going to be generations before it gets flipped back. But again, I don't understand why people are being quiet and silent about this. There should be more of an outrage and more anger towards this. And I'm just not hearing it. I'm not seeing it.
It's because of COVID.
No,
right, but COVID is up. But COVID's not. But here's the thing: if you as a woman, what's more important to you, COVID or your rights, right? Like,
vaccine
wearing a mask,
passports or
right?
abortion. Vaccine passports or abortion. 7,000, almost 8,000 babies dead at the hands of the Catholic Church and the government, or preventing a bunch of other babies being not born because we can't mind our damn business. It's just, sorry.
No, you're not wrong.
COVID.
And
it's not COVID. People
I agree. I agree it's not COVID.
Out to lunch.
Protesting is because of COVID. I think that's why you don't have massive numbers of women.
Black people did after George Floyd.
Yeah, I don't blame COVID. I don't blame
COVID. I think that Black people protesting was simply because they were being murdered like on the streets. So it was an expression that had to be done. But if you have, gotten in the habit of believing that your rights, or at least in democratic states, are going to be okay, then I think there's less desperation to get out there and protest, because a lot of people who are Democrats are also taking COVID very seriously. And the numbers in the US are very high. So I think it does make sense that the people who are confident that they live in a space which is not going to reverse abortion access would not have that life or death thing that we have to get out right now and protest right now. I do think they would, if it was like a situation which would be happening the next day. I think they're weighing that what is more urgent for us to do. Is it to stay inside and wait this out? And when it's safer, then we can. I do think COVID absolutely does play a part, because these are Democratic women who believe in the seriousness of COVID and the seriousness of masking. These are not Republican women who have a completely different take.
But these
so
are
it does
Republican
matter
states.
who your
right. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, while everyone's being all tipsy-turvy around COVID, these politicians are making these moves. like that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I don't think COVID is a reason for people to not to
Those
be out
politi-
there.
No, but those politicians are Republicans. See, there's a
Right, but
big divide.
And those
But it doesn't
individuals
matter.
are Republicans.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. The point of fact is you have individuals who are making decisions for the masses. So if you as a Democratic woman are like, okay, I'm going to like respect COVID and stay in the House. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, this Republican is choosing what's going to happen.
No, but those Republicans are not that worried about COVID. That's the point
Right.
I'm making.
Right. What
But
I'm
they're
saying
not
is that
actually worried about it. That's why they're getting together. That's why they're doing these protests. Whereas Democrats do take it very seriously. So they would be less likely to risk, going out and protesting right now. I do think they would if
You
it
can
was not
protest
there.
without going in groups.
and I'm just
You
saying that
can
by the time
protest without going out in groups.
Tyranny.
Black people will go and boycott a business, and they have the power to shut it down if they boycott it for long enough. After
just
Black
think that-
Lives Matter, there are
Yeah.
ways to protest without going in the streets and having access.
yeah, I just
don't
think
think that their access is going to be seriously curtailed. Otherwise, I think they would be protesting.
see, but I think
really-
that
But it
but
is.
but I think that waiting until it's safe to go protest is going to be too late.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is that the Republicans are taking advantage of the Democrats' perception.
They are taking
COVID.
advantage, and that's
Right. So what I'm
politicians
saying
do.
is that as a Democrat, you got to think like a Republican. That's what I'm trying to say.
Bingo.
So if
They
you're a
don't.
Democratic person, you got to
But
think
they
like a
don't.
Republican and realize the Republicans are moving while this COVID is here. You have tons of states in the union right now who are wide open. They are open for business. They are letting people, they are doing whatever they want to do. All I'm trying to say is that as a Democratic minded person, if you're going to sit back and be like, okay, well, I'm going to wait till it's safe to go outside to protest Republican actions that are going to affect my life and the generations to follow, you're going to be too late by the time they give you the all clear.
I think
is
the
what I'm
real
trying to
fight
say.
is going to be in the Supreme
It's going to be
Court,
here
right?
too, though. So let's bring it
Um,
back to Canada, because it is going to bring it back here too, right? Like, people here aren't talking about the actual problems we have. People aren't actually going demonstrating or doing anything. Like, we're just nagging, we're just chatting. This is just a casual conversation. We're all being quote unquote civilized, trying not to offend each other, trying to be, cool temperature and not stir up the pot. But the reality is, like, our freedom is not going to be handed to us. And you know what's equally frightening as a liberal majority? Any majority.
Yeah, nobody should
Any
have a majority, but the conservatives
The
cannot
Greens.
get one.
The Greens
They're-
come in pro planet, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Great. Absolutely anti many human rights in other forms. Like, let's go there. Let's NDP,
No.
like,
Yeah.
really, no, I don't want any of these people to have a majority.
No,
And
that's
why in our
true.
last episode,
Nobody should have a
like,
majority.
for the
I
love
agree
of
with
God,
that.
just vote for who your heart wants, even if it's the PPC, which I hate. Just vote for who you want.
But I don't think that right now, in the climate we are at right now, post pandemic, with the the CERB ending and everything, I don't think right now anybody else can get a majority. That is out of the question. It's not going to happen. When people are afraid, they vote safe. That's why they call this election, because they know that when you're afraid, what do? You vote for the safest option. You vote not to change because you're afraid. So there is no way the conservatives are going to end up with a majority at this point. That's completely not going to happen. I do think they could increase their number of seats. It's looking like it anyways, but there's no way they can get a majority. However, the Liberals can get a majority, because you will have enough scared people who will just say, oh my God, we could all die tomorrow and they saved us, and they're going to vote Liberal. And I think that is a real threat. Whereas the conservatives winning right now at this point in time, winning a majority is not going to happen. And Greens, they may pick up some more seats. I think that's entirely possible, but realistically, there's not going to be like a green wave. And NDP, I don't know. They always come close, but they don't always win, right? So I just see not much changing. Honestly, I don't see too much changing on election day. So again, I don't know why he called this election. I think it was ridiculous and awful timing. But they're going to do what they're going to do. So And Quebec is apparently a nation. That was something new that I found out because he said it not once, but like 20 times.
Multiple times, yeah.
Many times. Quebec is a nation. Quebec is a nation. I'm thinking, is he delusional? What is he
Lena, if
saying?
you're listening to this episode, I might need my passport next time I visit you in Montreal.
Oh my goodness. He just kept saying it. I mean, they're just so full of themselves. And honestly, this is again going to be unpopular, but if they're so desperate to be separate, why don't they just separate it and just be done with it?
They aren't, just
Yeah.
certain people are. The bloc is, right? The bloc is, but they don't even have like, I really don't believe they even have really the majority in their own province when it comes to federal level. Like, I don't know, man. I just know that why are we still talking about Quebec separating when the world is on fire? Women are losing
They
their
keep
rights,
talking about it. They just don't stop.
and people are getting murdered for looking, sounding, or believing differently than others. I'm just really thoroughly sick of it. I'm just at a point where I'm like fundamentally disgusted with Canada. And I'm really embarrassed to be Canadian, to be very frank. I'm really embarrassed that I went from, considering that I have 2 passports and one of them was here and one of them was like, dictatorship, slightly, cute to say you're Egyptian because you're exotic, but like, meh, now they're both like me. Now they're both like a joke right now because I don't feel represented by my government. I don't feel my government gives a damn about me. And you know what? It is their job to give a damn about me.
Yeah.
It is their job. It is literally in your job description, politicians.
Yeah.
Your job description is not to talk out of your ass. Your job description is not to give me some legal jargon, law bullshit, and loopholes to get away with things that you normally can't get away with. Your job is not to waste our money and time arguing nonsense. Your job is to have our best interests as a country, as a people, as a nation, as a grieving community of loss, as a country with a horrific history that needs to be rehabilitated. We need to repair the wounds from this historic generational trauma that we have inflicted on our Indigenous communities, on our Black communities, on our immigrant communities, on our white communities, because we have really disadvantaged our white communities by making them think that they are in a world where everyone is out to get them. They really have. They have created a generational trauma within the white population by under-equipping them with education, over-equipping them with false arrogance and pride, and giving them no money and nothing to be proud of. This is what they've done to our nation. And then, like, my parents came to Canada because it was, a land of opportunity. They had the choice between the US and Canada. They chose Canada for whatever reason it was. I often wonder if that was the right choice. I wonder who I would have been had I been born and raised in New York. My sister would have been raised in New York. Like, we would have been different people. I would have probably met Allon a lot sooner than I did. Who knows? But the reality is, we are not this peaceful nation that we depict Canada as this peaceful nation all around the world. When you travel, put a little pin with your flag on it.
Deceptive.
We're actually big losers. We're big losers on an international level, because when we go around pretending and flailing our money around at other countries, we're actually dishonoring our own country by refusing to protect our own population from the dictatorships provincially, municipally, and federally. I'm going to bring it to closing points. Allon, what are your closing points on all of this?
I think you said a lot of profound stuff in that last statement. And I think the perspective, I don't think anyone caught that. I think the perspective of the powers that be disabling the white community is that's deep, and you're not wrong in any of that. And I think it's very clear here in the Maritimes of how bad that disability is. Like you just said, the powers that be have made a whole generation, 2 generations of people, of white people in the middle class or former middle class communities think that they're owed something and have given them nothing but a book of excuses as to why things aren't going well, and they've bought into it hook, line, and sinker. It's crazy. I think what needs to be realized is that, like you just said, all of us are victims of this power structure, this political power structure, of the rhetoric of the game that politicians play. Yes, minorities and people of color absolutely are the obvious targets and the obvious victims, but white people need to wake up and realize that they are victims as well, and that they are being victimized and taken advantage of just as much as the rest of us. Just because the oppressor looks like you doesn't mean you're not being oppressed, right? So I think my closing point is that politics is always going to be what it is. I think that, again, people of color need to understand that it is a game, and not to put your hope and faith and trust in a candidate just because they have the same pigment as you, because in the end, it's a career choice. It's a career path, and it's a system that is set up. And so, as I said earlier, either we need to understand that and, expect the flip-flop to come, or just expect them to do very, very little and not set the bar so high. Because we talk about this constantly, and it's just never going to, I don't see any end in sight, honestly, of things getting better, politically, and socially for minorities and people of color. It's always something. Right? And I just think that, don't put your faith in politicians. You're gonna have to change things on your own in interpersonal relationships and on a day-to-day basis. But waiting for a politician to come along to change things, that's false hope. And I think any politician who goes out on a platform that's what they're going to bring you is full of shit. And that's my final point.
Thank you, Allon. Natasha.
Well,
How
I'm
do
just
you-
going to reiterate that I'm very disappointed that anti-racism was not a core topic in this year's campaign. It should have been, and it's not. And they're talking about everything else, but they're not talking about that. And like Allon said, you can't expect that because a person of color is a leader of a party that they're going to center it, because they don't. I hardly heard anything from Jagmeet or from what's her name, Anime Hall, who's a double minority, and did not hear
Triple.
anything from them about that. So they did they talked about reconciliation, because that was
Flavor of the month.
topic, flavor of the month, exactly. And that's all they talked about. They did not talk about the fact that the core racism in all our institutions all over the country, but of course we know it's special in New Brunswick, but it's everywhere, and that is going to destroy this country. I really don't think that it's been stressed enough, but you cannot set up populations against each other and expect to thrive. You cannot. And I see no urgency coming from them. They're not even talking about it. With Trudeau, it's more of the same. He wants to just keep doing what he's doing, which is pretty conversations and nothing else about racism. No end to racial profiling, no end to any of that, which he could have easily done, but he's not doing it. So I'm very disappointed that it's not a core topic in this campaign, and that's why I have no hope that things are going to get better, because if they can't even talk about it, then doing something about it is way off. And it really worries me how he's going to keep using, when I say he, I mean Trudeau and the Liberal Party are going to keep using this pandemic. They're going to drag it on as long as possible because they want to avoid dismantling white supremacist structures. That's what I see.
Thank you, Natasha. I put in my vote today. I took my children with me.
Oh,
I took
did
my
you?
2-year-old and I took my 5-year-old, and not because I didn't have anybody to watch them, but because
I do that too.
well, because it's something that they should not take for granted.
Exactly.
So I went and picked them up early from school, and we went and I explained to them what was happening, what was the process. Obviously on 2 and 5-year-old terms. Well, one was half unconscious, the 2-year-old was half unconscious, but this is, dear people who have never known what it's like to not be able to vote. Dear people who have never known what it's like to not be able to walk down your street without being watched, or fear that, you know, a military personnel is going to bust through your doors and judge who you're having relationships with and where you're investing your money. To those who think, you know, the idea of walking down the street and seeing military machine guns and tanks is, you know, just a myth. It's not. It's really not. You know, one thing that really stood out to my husband when we visited Egypt was the machine guns and the tanks.
Mhm.
And you know, that is an in-your-face control.
Yeah.
But here we have a different kind of control.
Yes.
And it's one that we use because we want to fool the person in front of us. We want to lie to them. And we want them to think that we have actually their best interest and are actually doing their job. And Muammar Gaddafi, the way he took over his country and had the tyranny that he had, his monarchy essentially was what he was planning, but his dictatorship was one where he destroyed the education system.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm not going to lie, our education system is pretty similar to what the education system in Libya was and is still recovering from. Our children are not being given justice
No.
as to the amount of knowledge and power that we can give them. And there is an agenda of this, right? Because as we are complacent, they go to the ranch and they plan, just like they do in the US, just like they do in dictatorship countries.
Yeah.
And dear white people, you are not above this. In that situation, you're in the same ditch we're in. You're being oppressed. You're being fooled. You're being mocked, and you're being used brutally. And if there is nothing else that you learn from this situation that you are in right now, learn that you have access to knowledge.
Yes.
Learn that you have the power to communicate, be it to listen or to speak. Look at your surroundings and take advantage of that freedom right now as we still have it. Because the jump from where we are today and where Gaddafi was is not that big of a difference.
Yeah.
The first thing they destroyed was the education.
System.
We don't need to destroy the education system here. It's already horse manure, especially in New Brunswick.
Oh, but they're trying, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to mention that I think attempts are being made to bring down the education system in other parts of the country because you know how you have honors and AP classes
Yes.
in high school?
We used to have them here.
They're thinking of removing them because they want everyone to be equal. And that's the reason that's being given. but that's not really the reason.
I'm not against that if they were bringing everyone up
No.
to that level,
They're not. They're bringing.
but they're not.
everybody
They're
to
bringing
their own-
everyone down.
Yes.
You know, fellow Canadians, if you're sitting this one out and you're not voting,
Mhm.
dear God, please don't contribute to a majority. Okay.
Please don't.
If you're thinking about not voting because you're so disgusted, please go out and vote for anything other
Anybody.
than the liberal and the conservative, just to ensure that we get seats and other things too.
Vote PPC.
Dude, I don't even care if you vote PPC. Again, I really, really think that Bernier is an absolute tyrant, but
Not
vote
well.
for him.
He's crazy.
Tyrant. No, none of them are well. For those of you who have done your duty of voting, I'm glad. I'm proud of you for taking that duty seriously. For all people of color who either want to bootlick or sell out and come at me with like, oh, but Jagmeet or Enemy are people of color, blah, 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 blah. That's bootlicking. Or no. The liberals are amazing. They have given us so much. That's selling out. Please stop lying to yourself, because you're sure as hell not lying to me. I can see right through it. You cannot agree to disagree on politics. This is not something you can agree to disagree on. You can agree to have different viewpoints. You can agree to have different ways of getting to a similar destination. But if you can't sit down and talk about it, there's a problem. And with that, be kind to each other. Support one another. But most of all, please stand up for each other. And y'all better go vote. Have a good day.